Tom, we've heard a lot about what's going on today, right now as we speak, actually, in Ukraine. You heard the Prime Minister literally half an hour ago, roughly, talking about more sanctions being ramped up, NATO doing the same today. So tell me what you think, first of all, from what you've heard.
I think that Trudeau's on the right path when he talks about that SWIFT system for clearing payments between banks. We don't think about it often, but there are actually over 10,000 different banks, not branches, actual banks in different countries around the world, and they have to have a way of sending money around, and that's called the SWIFT system. It's centered in Belgium, and that's how money moves around the world. Excluding the Russians from that will make life extremely difficult. Yesterday, what happened was the Germans, after having said, "Oh, we got really tough with them, we're going to, push off the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline." Now, apparently, they're saying, "Well, we just delayed it; it'll probably go through anyway." Then they were the ones who were fighting against this sanction against the Russians on SWIFT. Turns out now, I was very glad to see Mr. Trudeau go against that, and go against the Germans and go in favor of excluding the Russians from this system. And it looks like there might be enough people on board to make this happen. That would be very good news, because this is what's missing, is a real sanction with teeth that actually hurts them. This will hurt the Russians. With what's happening now, it's such a barbaric, unprovoked attack on an autonomous, sovereign state, which is Ukraine. It's been through enough through history, thank you. And now the Russians are just showing that this current government is composed of thugs, and it's a shame that the world isn't able to react more than it is. But I think that long term, this is going to affect the Russians negatively more than anybody else.
So just about an hour ago, we were speaking to Ina, a politician, and she was in a bomb shelter, describing to us what it was like. But she also said, we don't need prayers, we don't need hugs, we need you to increase those sanctions. You need to target Putin's cronies directly. Do you think these latest sanctions will do that at all?
Well, we're dealing with a kleptocracy, just the people who at the top who steal as much as they can, including Putin. Estimates range into the billions and billions of U.S. dollars that he's socked away outside the country. He built himself a palace that in and of itself cost apparently over $500 million. And it put a smile on my face, a wry smile anyway, last week when the last thing that he did before launching this attack was remove his multi-$100 million yacht from Germany, from the shipyard where it was. So this is what they're about. There's a very small group of people, the oligarchs. They're a bunch of criminals, and now the world is recognizing them as such, and go after them. Go after their wealth. Go make life miserable for them. If they think that they can take over a country of 45 million people in Europe with impunity, it's not because it's not part of the European Union that Ukraine is not part of Europe. It's in Europe. And it's got to be understood that this is the beginning of the breakdown of the fundamental rules that have kept the planet safe since the end of the Second World War, and the Russians are breaking that system. And it's so unspeakably wrong that we've got to do everything we can. Right now, Canada can't do very much, of course, militarily, but we can be part of the hard work of getting those sanctions to really bite. And that's what Trudeau did today, much to his credit.
Jim, there was a story, Tom, there was a story earlier today that maybe, just maybe, there might be the opportunity here for negotiations. First it was, I think the Ukrainians who brought it up, then it was denied apparently by the Russian foreign minister. Have we passed that point, or do you think that's still doable here?
It depends on which theory you're looking at. Since the Crimea, it's been clear to me that the parts that were left unsettled at the fall of the Soviet Union, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, there were things that were not going to hold. It's not true that Ukraine, once they threw out the puppet government put in by the Russians and became more autonomous about a decade ago, it's not true that they were just going to be able to affirm and assert their autonomy and their control of Crimea, for example. Those are the two most important naval bases of Russia. That's where I think that the world missed an opportunity, because the Russians were signaling, by the way, you're not keeping Crimea. We're going to take it back because this is something that we've always considered Russian. That's a big debate. But at the time, we should have been listening to what it meant, and we should have sat down and had an adult conversation about this. The Russians invented the problems. They said they were going in as peacekeepers, but there were those two sections, smallish compared to this very large country of Ukraine, in the eastern part that were primarily Russian-speaking, and they were misbehaving, but they were saying, you can't cut us off from Russia. Again, we had a missed opportunity for an adult conversation. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to in any way, shape, or form justify the barbaric actions of Russia, but what I am saying is, if we had been paying attention, we would have started discussing this earlier. that leads to the question, is there any hope or opening for analysis, for discussion, for another way out of this thing than more fighting? I think it's a possibility. But again, it's going to take everybody looking at this differently than we have for the past 10 years.
Okay.
I've been reading about how Biden pulling out of Afghanistan in November plays a role in all of this. Do you see that, Tom?
Of course, they're all connected. The abject failure of the American adventure in Iraq that cost them trillions of dollars for no certain results, less security in that country than when they moved in. They were looking for a way to get back at the world after the terrorist attacks. Mm-hmm. So they went back into Iraq after the original fight in the first Gulf War. They went back in, and it's cost them an enormous amount of treasure, but the place is less secure and less safe than it was before. They went into Afghanistan, spent trillions of dollars there, left with their tails between their legs. On their way out, they were going to show they were tough. They threw some bombs that wound up hurting civilians, and they finally had to admit what they had done. Look, it didn't go well for the American military. Of course, Biden was hoping somehow to turn this into an opportunity for himself to show that American foreign policy and the American approach works. But he was saying from the outset that they were not going to send a single American soldier in there. So you've limited your own options. But now the world coming together against Russia, they're starting to feel the sting. They're starting to say, we've really made ourselves outcasts here. And what's the end game? How can a country of 140 million, which is Russia, it's got a very small population, way less than half of the United States population, and about a quarter or a fifth of Europe's population. How are they supposed to swallow a country of 45 million? There's going to be constant resistance. It's not going to go well. So, yes, I think that there's an eminent possibility that cooler heads could prevail, but everybody's going to have to put some water in their wine.
Yeah, and it doesn't strike me, I guess, and others that I keep hearing and reading about that Putin is one of those guys to put water in his wine. So I think that's the part that worries so many people.
He's going to have to put some water in his vodka.
Yeah, well, there you go.
All right, well, speaking of cooler heads prevailing, I don't think that's what's going on with Marlene Jennings right now. What
dear.
Did you think
Poor
about
Marlene.
Yeah, so she sent out this tweet, Tom, and she seems to be doubling down. What do you make of all this?
Well, she got rid of the tweet where she made the most bizarre comparison at Legault's lamenting the state of play in Ukraine and saying, well, how can you feel badly about that when you're taking away our rights? I mean, this is the type of thing that the average person can tweet, and it doesn't really matter, but she's a public figure. Mm-hmm. She is the president of the only group we've got left. Where once was Alliance Quebec and a well-structured organization, we've now got Marlene and the Quebec Community Groups Network, and it's not going so well because they're not even structured well enough to have somebody holding onto her Twitter account and saying, you can't say that, boss, because you're the president of the QCGN. That's the only game in town. So she erased that tweet. She deleted it. And then she put one up saying nothing but nice things about Legault. I mean, pick a lane. You can't go from one extreme to the other in a few hours and not expect people to notice it. And so poor old Marlene is really not having a good day. But then again, neither is David Birnbaum, because I simply didn't believe that he had voted for this thing on the English stage-ups. And I had a chance to talk to him today, and he confirmed for me that he did, that he voted for this provision that would require kids in English stage-ups to take 3 of their classes in their area of study. So if you're in science, that could be your biology and your math and your chemistry, that sort of thing, in French. And I said, so you voted for it. And it took a while to get it out of him because it had already been confirmed for me in-house, but I wanted him to tell me, and he did. And the explanation was extremely difficult to follow.
Well, okay, what does that mean?
Interesting.
Why don't you get him on and get him to give you the explanation? It goes through a whole series of steps having to do with a 27-point program that the Liberals had. I mean, thank goodness Dominic Anglade very courageously grabbed this thing by the horns yesterday after this whole schlemazel on Wednesday and said, no, our proposals had to do with a situation where the CAC had not started attacking English stage-ups. We would never go along with this in the context of a notwithstanding clause and everything that they've been doing to put limitations on the English stage-ups. That was the context in which we had talked about any of this stuff. And she made it quite clear, as we discussed yesterday, that as it now stands, she'd never be able to back Bill 96, much to her credit. So thank goodness she was there, because David Birnbaum, who's supposed to be the person who's in charge of that file for the opposition Liberals, You're going to have to get him on. Get him to explain it to me, because I know I didn't understand it.
Yeah, I will. I didn't understand it when Hélène David tweeted out sort of congratulating the Liberals themselves for having gone along with this. So that didn't make sense to me even after we asked Dominic
in yesterday's Gazette piece on this, signed by Phil Oche, Birnbaum was congratulating them as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to pinch myself when I was reading it.
Tom, you have a good weekend. I thank you.
All the best to you guys, too.